What's up, guys? It's your boys Taylor and Taylor coming back at you with another episode of the Empirical Scouting Podcast. This is episode 20. I can't believe we're already here. Last episode, we detailed 6 of the wide receivers in the upcoming draft: Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Rome Odunze, Xavier Worthy, and Adonai Mitchell. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. Some good stuff in there, and those are some of the top wide receivers. Today, we're going to continue our wide receiver talk with even more wide receivers in this absolutely stacked wide receiver class. This truly could be one of the best wide receiver rooms we've seen in a long, long time. So we have a lot of guys to get through, so let's not waste any more time and dive right in. We are going to start with Ladd McConkey. Some of his measurements from the combine: 5'11" and 5'8", the 28th percentile, and 186 pounds, the 17th percentile, coming in with a 72-inch wingspan, the 9th percentile. So measurements not really quite there. However, some of his testing, complete opposite. He had 4.3940, 86 percentile, 36-inch vert, and 124 broad jump, 55th and 69th percentiles. He didn't really test in any of the drills outside of those. 3 years as a key player at Georgia, totaled 1,687 yards with 14 touchdowns, added 200 yards and 4 touchdowns to the ground as well. He's my dog. I love him. Georgia legend. So let me hear more about Ladd McConkey in your opinion.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Ladd, truthfully. I didn't think I was gonna be when I first started, or when I first found out about him, but that was, a year ago or 2 years ago, whatever at this point, right? Because he was a multi-year starter. But I ended up being a big fan of Ladd once I really dug in on everything, and especially after the testing. I think that was kind of the last big hurdle for him, for his stock, so to speak, because people kept comparing him to Julian Edelman and Wes Welker and Cooper Kupp.
It was just insert white receiver there.
Yeah, it was insert white slot receiver in there.
True, very true.
And Ladd is a lot more than that. He really is. Ladd, to me, showed good inside-out versatility. He's got the athleticism to play outside. The only question for him overall, or there's two questions, is one is his frame. He's a smaller guy, a smaller receiver, obviously. And then number two is how is that frame going to hold up when he translates to the next level, which is going to be more physical and everything like that. He did, go through injury issues this past season. I want to say he had an ankle issue, a back issue, things like that. Back issues don't just resolve themselves either. Back issues are usually something that is like, once you get back issues, they don't go away. So that's my biggest concern with Ladd right now. Like, how long can he hold up? How many games every season is he going to be able to play? But truthfully, if you took out the injury concerns, and even with the small frame, no injury red flags to me, Ladd may be a first round prospect to me. I think he's really good. I think he's a guy that I don't want to say he's a surefire guy that's you can build an offense around as a go-to receiver, but he certainly could be a wide receiver one for an offense, and he certainly could be a very productive receiver in the NFL.
Yeah. I think his productivity will definitely be there in the NFL. It's just, I don't know if you could necessarily build an offense solely around him. He's very good. He obviously creates good separation. That's one of the things that we've seen all over social media. His route running abilities. He's very reliable as a catcher. He went through a small spell of drops early last season. It was very weird to see because we hadn't seen that as Georgia fans before. Then he obviously got hurt, came back, and seemed to fix the hands. I think it was just, one of those things where he was just happened to drop a couple passes that we hadn't seen him drop in the past, but I wouldn't say he has a drop issue at all. I think he'd be perfect as a wide receiver 1B, if not a wide receiver 2. However, he could I wouldn't be surprised if he went on a team with a wide receiver 1. He actually outperformed them, statistically wise. He's a guy that will get those, I want to say, I told you this earlier in the year when everyone was, comping him to the insert white slot receiver here. And I saw him more as a Deontay Johnson type wide receiver.
Yeah, I can see that type of player too. And I went with John Brown for my comp because they kind of actually profile similarly size and athleticism wise. And John Brown was never the superstar receiver in Arizona, but he was certainly a productive receiver to the point where, like, when him and Fitzgerald and Floyd were there, people were saying, like, that's the best wide receiver room in the NFL at one point. So I definitely think he can be super productive. I'm not worried about the hands overall. Like, I don't have an issue with that. I think you do recognize that, number one, he has smaller hands because he is a smaller guy overall, and number two, that he's gonna not be a contested catch type of receiver. I'm not really gonna want to throw jump balls to him and such. That being said, he's gonna make the effort to go up and get it. Like, he'll try. But I mean, he definitely will body catch. He'll struggle on contested catches, struggle against physical press. But overall, like, he's definitely a receiver that I would love to have on my offense. I think he can definitely be that 1B type, and be a very productive receiver. He just has to stay healthy.
Yeah. And with the frame, obviously, that's always going to be a concern. He's a little bit on the smaller end, but we've seen plenty of smaller receivers make it in the NFL. I mean, I'm looking at his his measurements, and he comps as far as like physically wise very close to like John Mechie and Jordan Addison, as well as Mecole Hardman. So obviously, as talent wise, I mean, we've seen Jordan Addison kind of pop this year as a rookie, and I think he'll just get better and better. John Mechie hasn't really lived up to what he did in college.
Well,
Mecole
that's not fair
Hardman
with
was always a
Mechie.
burner. Yeah, I know. I was just saying, like, statistically wise, he hasn't gotten there yet, but that wasn't 100% his fault. But no, I agree. I'm obviously kind of partial to Ladd. He's going to be a Georgia legend forever. I always remember some of those plays that he did and helped us win back-to-back national championships. But we will move on from my dog. Now we'll slide it over to your Gator and Ricky Pearsall. 6'1", 48th percentile at 189 pounds, the 22nd percentile. He has a 73 and 3/8 wingspan, so 11th percentile. So even though you see that catch on the screen right there that he has a pretty small wingspan. However, he's very, very similar to Ladd in the sense that his performance at the combine greatly outweighs his measurements. He had a 4.4 140, which is the 82nd percentile, 42-inch vert, and 129-inch broad jump, the 97th and 88th percentiles. He also did do a three-cone drill. I love the three-cone drill. I think you do too as well.
I don't think you would
percentile. Yeah, but he had 6'4", 93rd percentile. So
did he really on the three-cone?
He did on the three-cone. So
it doesn't show up on film.
It doesn't. Well, we'll get there. He spent 3 years at Arizona State. Happened to be alongside Jaden Daniels at the time too, and spent his final 2 seasons down in Gainesville with the Florida Gators. In those 2 seasons, he racked up 1,600 yards and 9 touchdowns and added 175 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. We saw that spectacular OBJ-like catch that we see on the screen right there as well. And he had a pretty good season, but overall didn't really jump out on page. But he's picking up steam, post-season, post-combine. Like, he's getting a pretty hot name. So let me hear more on your Gator.
I'm going to be honest with you. I hated Ricky Pearsall for as long as, like, throughout all of his college career at Florida. I didn't like him. I really felt like Florida's wide receiver room kind of left the quarterbacks hanging, including, Graham Mertz this past year. Like, I think Graham Mertz had actually a really, really good year this past year for the expectations. But overall, Pearsall did, improve in college. Yes, he's picking up steam. I think it's a little bit, too much or too rich for my taste, so to speak.
That the post-combine height.
Well, even like the Senior Bowl is kind of, I feel like, where it started almost. But I think he's similar to Ladd. He's a very similar receiver in the sense that they're both like undersized, very polished route runners that just they can play more than the slot. They're inside out guys. And they're a lot more athletic than you're going to think. And Pearsall, the thing with him is, short arms, short wingspan, but he's got he had an incredibly low drop rate according to PFF, 3.6. Like, he shows a really good ability to track the ball well and be a kind of reliable possession type of guy. My thing with Ricky Pearsall is I really like if you want to say like I don't trust Ladd as a option to build an offense from, I really don't trust Pearsall as that. Pearsall to me is like an ideal like 2 to 3 wide receiver, and I have a second round grade on that because I think 2 to 3 wide receivers are like very valuable in the NFL, especially ones that have reliable hands. But like there's like talk of this guy like top 40 and such. Like I don't know if I can get on with that. Yeah, I think he's really good. I just the second round grade truthfully is like more so a result of how polished he is at so many other aspects than like what I really think he is, if that makes sense. And I went with the Calvin Ridley comp because this may be a little bit more of a blunt conversation for me and you with our history as friends with Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley like was a great receiver for the Falcons, but he was a great number 2 wide receiver for the Falcons. And I think his time being a number 1 in Atlanta and in Jacksonville has kind of shown like he's good, but he's not great. He's not an alpha number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. And I think Pearsall is a similar guy. I think Pearsall is a very polished guy that's going to play similar to Calvin Ridley, but I don't think Pearsall would ever flourish in a role higher than what a wide receiver 2 is on a good offense.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think he's going to be another guy who's going to be really productive as an NFL wide receiver, but not necessarily a guy who stands out on paper, a guy that you're going to really be targeting in fantasy drafts. I like to think of him the way I think his role is going to be is more of like a Bengals. Like he's the wide receiver 3.
You're thinking Tyler Boyd?
Yeah, Tyler Boyd. I'm sorry to say the name. Well, yeah, I'm thinking like more like Tyler Boyd, where it's like he's not the wide receiver 1, he's not the wide receiver 2, but he's a very productive wide receiver 3 who can step into that wide receiver 2 type role, barring injury or during a free agent year when they lose.
Yeah, Pearsall truthfully
was kind of role.
I'm not Pearsall. Yeah, I get that. I'm not going to go into like the athleticism compared blah blah blah. But I mean, Pearsall was truthfully like one of the hardest wide receivers for me to find a good comp for, because I really felt like Ridley was higher praise or comes off more than what I'm really intending. But it's tough because I like to match up my comps with athleticism profile, size profile, and play style profile. So it's like, all those things coming together so you can get a real good idea of how they can transition. Like Ridley, I think, carries a much higher name value than I think personally. So
no, I agree. I agree between his draft, stock, what he did at Alabama, and what he did as wide receiver 2 here in Atlanta. I think his name carries a little bit more value than his actual productivity on the field. But we're going to keep the theme sticking in the SEC and travel over to Gamecock country. We'll talk about Xavier Legette. So complete opposite type of receiver than these two guys, a 6'1", 48th percentile, 221, and 90th percentile with a 77.5-inch wingspan, 62nd percentile. His numbers, just like the other two, very, very good, especially for his size and weight. 4'3", 940, 94th percentile, a 40-inch vert with 126-inch broad jump, the 91st and 79th percentiles, respectively. He was a 5-year contributor with the Gamecocks, but really only kind of broke out this past year with a little over 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns. For this man, the height, weight, speed combo is just impressive. But does it worry you at all about him taking pretty much till his 5th year to actually show what he can do on the field?
Definitely. It definitely does. There is some, explanation to it in the sense that he was behind some other guys, and then he also didn't play wide receiver full time in high school, so he's taking time to develop and things like that. Definitely concerns me, especially when you look at the context of what the season was for South Carolina, where Juice Wells wasn't on the field as often as he wanted to be, or as they wanted it to be. They weren't as good as they wanted to be, and so they were, losing games and throwing a lot and such. Rattler was kind of throwing a lot of jump balls and such, just trying to, make something happen. So yeah, it does concern me, and there's definitely, concerns overall with the profile in terms of how he plays. He's not a very polished guy. So I was surprised that he was only credited with 2 drops. He's a big guy. big athlete, but the breakout age and the route running polish is definitely a big concern for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's a guy that he has that big body. He actually has that speed, unlike a lot of guys his size and weight, which is very like eye popping, especially when you see him at the combine. You see him running 1-on-1s, and I don't know. There's just a thing I really like about him, but yeah, it's not his fault that he kind of had a late breakout. We've talked about it off air. Like, he had to play pretty much every position in high school just to get them to win. So he wasn't really getting that training as a wide receiver. He comes into South Carolina pretty raw at the position, so it's going to take him a couple years to develop. Would have liked to see him develop. He got on the field the last 45 years, but like he didn't really contribute. And let's just say that wide receiver room wasn't one of those kind of rooms that were holding him back. Like it wasn't like he was at Ohio State. He just couldn't get on the field. Like he's at South Carolina. They have some solid receivers in the past, but he should have been able to perform more and more. And so that's a little bit worrisome. I do agree. It's not necessarily his fault, but I just don't know if there's still room, being 23 and a half years old by week one, like how much is he actually going to grow as a wide receiver? But if he does, the ceiling is there. Like that ceiling with his size, weight, and speed is there where he could be. I don't know if he can necessarily be an alpha receiver on a team, but like he could be a really good number 2.
Yeah, he's still a good bit away from being a finished product, and it takes a really rare player, in my opinion, to come in and be a top option for an offense or a top tier option for an offense while still developing. The only player that I can think of really off the top of my head is Julio Jones, but he also had a lot of pressure taken off him because of Roddy at the beginning. And Julio was very much more farther along still than Legette was. Julio just got a lot more polished. Like instead of just being a pure, physical beast, he became, more a lot more nuanced and polished with his route running to become that whole package. So I mean, yeah, I have a round 2 grade on Legette. I think he's gonna go and he should go on day 2 in the NFL draft, and I think there's a chance he could become like a great option for a team. It's just going to be a matter of if that can really all be put together. But just for reference, like these guys, like these are the exact order that I have them ranked. And it kind of sounds bad in retrospect when I say this, but like Legette has the same grade for me as I had on Addison last year. And then, so Addison last year was like my wide receiver 3. Legette up to Marvin are all, tied with or higher than my top 3 wide receivers from last year. So that shows how deep it is. That that's 7 guys already or something like that were in that would be my top 3 last year. So
yeah, this is going to be one of those classes where we're going to see a lot of wide receivers pop. Of course, we're going to see some of them that do flop. But speaking of kind of huge swing kind of guy, we're going to move from the SEC all the way down to CUSA with Western Kentucky and talk about the Yak God himself, Malachi Corley. He's 5'11", which is the 22nd percentile, and 215 pounds, the 81st percentile. He did not test at the combine, unfortunately, but I really, really do wish he did. He had 4 years at the Hilltoppers, total 3,000 yards and 29 touchdowns, including 11 each of the last 2 seasons. So it's good to see he's very productive for more than just one season. He's a name that I would say the average college football watcher probably hadn't really heard of. So what exactly does Malachi Corley bring to the table?
Yeah, so number 1, I guess I spoke too soon. I forgot that I have Corley over Ladd. So Corley, Ladd.
I figured you did, yeah.
Yeah, Corley, Ladd, Pearsall, Legette. But Corley brings to the table like a very Deebo Samuel-esque skill set. And I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to be a Deebo type player. But the guy played running back and corner in high school, recruited as a corner, played primarily out of the slot during his time in college. And his background as a running back really shows every time he gets the ball. This guy is the most fun watch for if you want to see plays after the catch. He will run hard. He will lower his shoulder. He tries to pick up those yards. It is a very entertaining watch. He's got good field vision with it, and surprisingly good hands for a guy that's converted wide receiver. The concerns, the downside of it is the fact that, hey, he's not going to be as polished of a route runner because he's newer to it. He's not great in contested catches. He's a shorter guy, shorter arms and such. But similar to Legette, there's a lot of room there for being a lot more. There's a lot of upside. Now the question is, does he land with a team with a creative offensive coordinator that is going to utilize that? Because not every coordinator uses that.
No.
If you try to deploy him as a outside guy and like run an offense through him and such, he's gonna end up looking like a Kendall Wright type of or Corey Coleman type of situation. Not like direct play style comparisons there, but like he's not gonna be as productive as what he could be.
Yeah, and it's funny because like ever since I first started hearing about Malachi Corley, everyone's like, oh, he's like Deebo Samuel, like Deebo Samuel 2.0. You even mentioned him today. I was like, okay, let me watch some film on him because like how much I saw him like in highlights, during the season, but I was like, let me watch some tape, and like it was exactly like that. He was literally Deebo Samuel 2.0. He's lining up in the backfield. He's lining up where like the tight end were lined up. He's lining out wide. He's in the slot. He was all over the place, and it also had me where I thought Deebo Samuel was a little bit better of I'd say a route runner and a natural wide receiver coming out of South Carolina. He's not really, he is still really, obviously really good in the NFL, but he doesn't necessarily run those kind of routes. It's more of like manufactured, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like they just try to get him the ball with space and they're like, go eat. And he does very well. That's what I saw from Malachi Corley too. Like you said, if you rely on him to like be that route running technician or get open out wide, like he's not probably going to do it. But if you have a wide receiver one already and you can use him underneath and, running a little crossing route, running a screen, just getting him open in space and just getting him the ball, whether that's out of the backfield or whether it's not, like what we're seeing now a lot of times, which, it's happened for years, but I'd say the Chiefs kind of, and obviously with Deebo Samuel with San Francisco, they've kind of led the way in this, where you'll see wide receivers out of the backfield to get that mismatch with the linebacker, and like this is a guy that like if I need that, I'm gonna do it. We saw with I think Khalil Shakir in Buffalo as well. Like it's getting more and more popular where you bring a wide receiver out from wide, put him in the backfield, and you get that mismatch on a linebacker or even like an inside like or safety. So he's gonna be a guy that you're gonna move around there. But I don't think if you have to like build an offense around him, I don't know how much it's gonna work. Like,
well,
obviously, him in Kansas City would be amazing, but they need another wide receiver, and that's what I'm trying to say. Like, you can't really build the whole offense around Malachi Corley. Like with Deebo Samuel, they have Brandon Ayuk, and
that's where I was going to go with it.
Yeah.
Is
okay.
Deebo, as great as Deebo is, like that offense really does not flow through him as much as it kind of did at one point because out of necessity. But now, like this version of the Niners this past year is more so Brandon Ayuk's offense in terms of the passing game than it is Deebo's. Obviously it's really Christian McCaffrey's if we're like really getting into it, but Brandon Ayuk's I would say Brandon Ayuk's the number one wide receiver in San Francisco if I had to pick one. And I think they would pick him over Deebo at this point too. And so, really what I'm getting to is I think a sneaky landing spot. I don't know San Francisco's exact draft capital situation, but I think with the rumors of like them being open to moving Deebo and Ayuk, I could definitely see them maybe moving Deebo at some point and then taking Corley on day 2 if they have, the ability to get him and just using him in a similar role.
Yeah, it would definitely be a cheaper option. And extending Deebo. I'm not sure of his contract situation either, but if they do move him,
he's getting paid. I know that.
Yeah, I knew that, but I didn't know how easy it would be to move him. or if they even want to move him. But with Malachi Corley, I feel like a team, whether San Francisco or not, it's a fun piece. It's a fun chess piece that you could definitely use that not a lot of teams really have right now.
Yeah, I mean,
There's a
tangentially,
there's a
I
reason.
do think they have to move Debo or Ayuk or both, like because their cap is about to be
Yeah,
destroyed, especially with the idea of an impending extension for Brock Purdy.
that's the key. It's Brock Purdy. It's what they're going to do at the quarterback position is they
He's,
just roll
he's
the
gonna
dice
get
with
to, he's
someone
gonna
else.
reset the market when he's up
Yeah,
for it.
no, I mean he's earned it. He's earned it for sure. So I agree with that. And then they'll definitely have to worry about the wide receiver positions, Christian McCaffrey. They already have to get an offensive lineman, so we'll see what they do there. But we're gonna travel all the way from Atlanta over to Eugene, Oregon, and talk about our next wide receiver in Troy Franklin. He's 6'1" and 7'8", 61st percentile. 176 pounds, which is only the fifth percentile. 77 and 1/4 inch wingspan at the 58th percentile. At the combine, he ran a 4.41 40, which is 82nd percentile. 39-inch vert and 124-inch broad, 85th and 69th percentiles, respectively. And with the three cone, he ran a 6.9, 63rd percentile. He was a 3-year contributor with the Ducks, totaled just under 2,500 yards with 25 touchdowns, majority of which ended up coming this past year. He's very tall and very skinny wide receiver, which the community I feel like has been like kind of slowing down on Troy Franklin. He was up there in that top 5, top 3, 4, or maybe not top 3, but top 4, top 5 for a while. And ever since the combine, I've been seeing it less and less. I do remember his gauntlet drill wasn't very pretty either, and some of his route running, even with no defenders, was kind of iffy. So just what do you see when you look at Troy Franklin?
Yeah, I mean, going along with what you were saying, I'm in that crowd, I guess, because I loved Troy Franklin over the summer. He was a top. I can't remember where I had him ranked off the top of my head, but I want to say he was top 3 for me, with Marv and Neighbors, and I think part of my number one, I think the biggest thing that happened was he measured shorter than his listed height. Like he's kind of 6'2", but I want to say they listed him at like 6'3". And when I see, yeah, I know you're at 7/8 of an inch, you're
Yeah,
basically 6'2", but like when I see 6'1" and 7/8 versus 6'3", it feels a lot more. It feels like a full 2 inches rather than it, being a full 2 inches. But I think we knew he was going to be skinny and weigh, in the lower percentiles. We knew that.
yeah,
But I think part of the issue as well, secondary to the height was, or maybe primary, was his testing was not good. Like for what you expect for what a deep threat type of wide receiver is. His 161 10-yard split is rough in my opinion. But I think the silver lining of it is he's been verified at 22 miles per hour in game. So,
yeah,
the in-game speed's there. He can definitely still stretch the field. It's just gonna, take some time to get that full speed. He's a polished route runner guy out there. He can, he's very good at the stem of the route to get separation. He's good releasing off the line on press. It's just gonna end up being like number one, similar to the lad conversation, is can this guy hold up at the NFL level when he is that skinny? Like it's not just weighing
yeah.
little; it's like also your body composition is
He's
very.
noticeably small. Like it's like Devontae Smith type, where everyone's looking at those pictures and it's like, can he hold up? Now, obviously, Devontae
Yeah,
Smith was a lot more polished as a wide receiver, but just in his frame, you look at him,
yeah.
you can noticeably see how small he is compared to other guys, even defensive backs. Like he's noticeably small, and like you said, the speed definitely pops on tape. He definitely creates a lot of separation. It's just I he can't really fight through press, like you said. He's not going to go up and make contested catches. He even had a slight drop issues from what I saw. He wasn't necessarily catching all the balls, even though he was wide open. So
Yeah,
it's just
he
one of those things
body
where,
catches a lot
yeah,
more than I remembered, like, or from what I
yeah,
could tell from last year. And I want to say, like, I don't think I really included it on his profile, um, because of how inconsistent it was. I might be wrong, but I want to say like his PFF, like they credit him with like way more drops this year than he had last year, and it kind of throws me off. Like, so what are you? Do you have reliable hands or do you not? Like, what's the deal here? So
I didn't realize he had that many drops either until I started watching. I was like, oh, he dropped that one. And there was a few that were kind of like, 50-50 where should he have caught it? But like, if you're going to make it to the next level, you should be bringing those down.
I'm going to lie backtrack myself on what I just said.
But yeah, he's just a guy that like, I wanted him in like round 2. For instance, I
was all in on him on being like a top 20 guy at one point this year, like, early on in the season. And I can't even talk myself into that kind of draft capital anymore, let alone a top 50 pick.
Yeah, top 50. I don't even know if he should go in round 3 at this point. Round 4 might be where you take a chance on that speed, but I don't know if
I'm still okay with him on a round like I'm okay with him round 3 grade wise, and I think that will translate to a higher pick, probably a round 2 pick, because, but it's going to be, you got to temper your expectations. I don't think once again like he's a guy that you want to have as your primary guy. I think he's a good secondary option in an offense, kind of similar to the comparison. Paul Richardson, like I liked Paul Richardson a lot when he was playing. I don't know if you remember that or not, but
I remember.
But I mean, Richardson was never like the primary guy in Seattle, but he was productive because he could do similar things like what Franklin could do, and it worked with like how Russ played at the time. But he was never the number one guy.
Did he get paid too after that one season?
He got super paid with Washington.
Yeah, that was it.
Barely played and everything.
I just remember that fantasy year.
Yeah. So Troy Franklin was credited with 3 drops his first year, 2 drops his second year. He had a 3.2 drop percentage last year. And this year he had 9 drops and a 10% drop percentage. So it's like, that is a very big difference to me. So what's going on there?
Yeah, I don't know. And he got the volume, obviously, so more targets, more drops, I guess, but it should be that in that case.
He had a lot of volume last year too, I felt like, but you're right. It was more this year.
He did, but yeah, I mean, just because the volume goes up, drop rate shouldn't necessarily skyrocket like that from a 3 to a 10. Like it's worrisome. But I think we're on the same page as pretty much the community and kind of slowing down Troy Franklin. I think the eye-popping numbers in the the big plays. That's the thing. He's going to rely on those big plays. Got us, but we'll finally move over to the current college football national champion, saving him for last. It's going to be Roman Wilson, 5'10", 3'4", 17 percentile, and only 185 pounds, 15 percentile with a 72.5-inch wingspan, 11th percentile. So another smaller guy. Seems to be kind of a theme right now. 4.39 40, which is the 86th percentile. He was a 4-year contributor with the Wolverines, but he only amassed like 1,700 yards and 20 touchdowns, added 110 on the ground and 2 touchdowns as well. He's an interesting case because stats on paper don't wow you. Measurables certainly don't wow you. Watching him on film doesn't necessarily wow you. But all he's done, he's another guy that ever since the Senior Bowl into the Combine, he's just gaining more and more steam. A lot of people are starting to like, if you want to take the chance on a wide receiver, day 2, this is my guy. So what's your take on Roman Wilson?
I mean, very similar profile overall to Ladd, to Pearsall, to Corley, in a lot of ways. My thing, the stark difference between him and Ladd and Pearsall is that Ladd and Pearsall, I believe, can play on the outside. I don't think Roman Wilson's an outside receiver personally. I think he's a slot only guy, which kind of limits number one. Like that's part of why he's ranked lower. And then, you compare him to another slot only guy like Corley. Corley's upside is a lot higher, in my opinion, because of his ability after the catch. Roman Wilson, I think, is a guy that should be a full-time player next year for an offense. Like, he should be a starting slot for whoever takes him. The thing is, though, number one, unless your offense is like the 2012 Patriots, your slot receiver isn't really going to be like this primary go-to receiver, especially like one like Roman Wilson. I think he's a very great piece for an offense. But Do I want to take him on day 2? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
As you can see with my grade. And I comp to a guy we know pretty well here, Zacchaeus. Polished route runner, smaller receiver, can be productive in the right situation, can be helpful and contribute, but he's not the guy that's going to be your go-to guy in my eyes.
No,
Very
I'm on the same page.
Very good hands. He's got very good hands.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I just don't think the ceiling is necessarily there with Roman Wilson. I think he's kind of limited to, like you said, that slot role where he can be very productive for like in the NFL, but not going to put up those numbers. Not going to want another guy you won't want on your fantasy team. And it's just like I don't know. I understand that the Michigan offense doesn't necessarily care about getting people numbers, but just it's 4 years of actually being on the field for like at least 7-8 games of the year and only totaling 1,700 yards. Like at some point, I want to see you catch the ball. I know they had games where they only threw the ball 8 times. I get it, but it's just something's holding me back. Where I'm like, I haven't seen it yet. And he was a 4-year player at Michigan. He's coming into the league just over 23 years old. And it's like, to me, that says that he has more to develop. Like he has to do more. Like he fit the Michigan role great, everything they needed.
I don't think.
But now in the NFL,
I don't think there's more to develop. I think he is who he is.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm saying the ceiling isn't there. Like, it really isn't more to There's not really like a Malachi Corley like we were talking about. Like, I think the ceiling's much higher than Roman Wilson is. Now, will they get to that? We don't know. That's the key. But with Roman Wilson, he's just going to be a guy who's going to consistently be that wide receiver 3-4 on a team, bounce around for a while. I mean, that's what Lamade over there is doing. He was for us, wide receiver up to wide receiver 2 out of necessity, but really was supposed to be our number 3 or 4. Did well, got himself a little paycheck, and now he's just going to bounce around the league, being that wide receiver 3 or 4 for a team. And there's nothing absolutely wrong with that. You honestly rather draft that, even day 3 or day 3, of course, but even round 3 to round 4, like. You'd rather that than a bust, a guy who's be out of the league.
Yeah, I mean, he's a reliable guy. And the thing with Roman Wilson is how many wide receivers that are his size that don't offer something special after the catch are elite wide receivers at the NFL level. Because, like, you look at his mock draftable comparisons, stock comparisons, you see Mechie, who's, Mechie's who he is. Like, he's had his issues that he can't help, but I don't think any of us really thought Mechie was gonna be a world beater receiver once he entered the draft. Jalen Waddle offers something special after the catch. Zay Flowers offers something special after the catch. Like Terry Godwin from UGA, it's guys that are either very special after the catch, explosive, or just good depth wide receivers.
I mean, Raheem Jarrett's another one I see on that list. Even Jamar Thrash in his same draft class. Like, I feel like Jamar Thrash offers a little bit more after the catch and that speed and burst that he has. Not necessarily a better wide receiver.
I haven't watched him, but like my, passing opinion from what I have seen would be, I think he offers more after the catch.
Yeah, I mean, I would out of all that whole list that we just named, Terry Godwin seems like a good one. Terry Godwin in Georgia, he's very reliable. He had that one-handed catch at Notre Dame that I'm sure some of y'all have seen in the past. Very reliable wide receiver, but like didn't offer much more, And if you don't offer much more, especially at that size, there's only so far you can go. I mean, he's still bouncing around teams right now. I think he's on a practice squad somewhere. I think it was at Carolina at one point. But yeah, I just don't see it too much with Roman Wilson. I think he'll be a solid player. Just there might be other guys that I'm willing to take more shots on.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But I think you had a couple more guys you wanted to bring up real quickly that I don't think I've seen the film on any of them, but I might have some opinions of them. So I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, we'll just hit on them real quick. So Javon Baker, guy I wanted to hit on. I'm a fan of him. I like his contested catch ability. Dude's got a crazy catch radius. He's a little shorter than I thought. Like he measured shorter than he looks on film to me. His long speed isn't the best, but I'm not going to give a T Higgins comp, but like he gives me shorter T Higgins type vibes almost. not the best.
You wouldn't be the only person that I've seen that say, give me T. Higgins vibes.
It's tough. Like you get the vibe, but he's also like 3 inches shorter than T. Higgins or something like that.
But play style.
But play style wise, yeah. And James Jones was kind of that way too back in Green Bay back in the day. If you remember, like he was always just catching jump balls from Rodgers pretty much or back shoulders. And I think, that's a similar type of player that Javon Baker can be. So I like Javon Baker a lot.
I really do want to that's probably look at you this weekend or coming into the early next week is like I've seen so many people on Javon Baker, and at first I thought it was just one of those, I want to pick a small school kind of guy, and hope he hits and just be right on Twitter all the time. But like more and more people have talked about it, and then they'll post some highlights of him. They'll post some of his. I think he had a pro day the other day, and I'm just like, okay. And then hearing you that you're kind of up on him, I'm definitely gonna need to watch him.
I think if he tested better, not even necessarily the 40, but just like other things, I think he would be in the conversation for being like a top 40 pick. I think I think if he either tested better or if he was like 2.5 inches taller, he'd be a top 40 pick. So it's kind of in a crappy spot for him, but I liked him a lot, truthfully, when I watched him. I think we'll hit on the next guy real quick. Keon Coleman, very divisive right now. And I actually there's people that like him and there's people that are like pointing out the flaws. And
it's really like I was gonna say it's either one or the other. Like you either think he's gonna be like a huge, wide receiver in the NFL, or you think he's gonna be an absolute bust. And there's no between right now.
I think the people, I don't want to say this in like a way that's it's gonna come off so snooty and know it all. I think the people that are insistent that he's this big contested catch target have only watched the LSU game or something like that, or seen the highlights.
Yes, because I thought the same. He played that game completely different than everything else.
Well, he made those contested catches in that game.
Yeah,
and then you go see other games, and he can't catch the ball through, or I don't want to say can't, but he struggles to catch the ball through contact, and he's not making these jump balls or anything like that. And it's just like, okay, you're a bigger guy, you're a basketball player, but you're not consistently doing the things that you need to be doing. And then the testing wasn't great. And I get the verified speed, like in the gauntlet and game speed and stuff, it's different, but it's tough. Like even putting that aside, it's tough for me to say I want to invest in you when you're a bigger receiver who is struggling to make catches through contact. And that's why I went with Allen Robinson Light. Very similar testing and sizes between them. But A-Rob, for a while, made those catches, those contested catches for a good bit of time.
Yeah.
But you also see the downside of it now with A-Rob where he fell off a cliff when that athleticism, the ability to kind of outjump people went away. And Coleman, I'm afraid it would go away 26, 27, and this guy's not even going to be barely worth being on your roster. Like Robinson, I don't even know if he had more than 300 or 400 yards this past season.
So
that's what I'm at.
I have an A-Rob still stashed in 2 dynasty leagues, and it's not very fun to have anymore. But no, the key though that you said was 26, 27. He's coming into the league at 21. So for me, being a little bit younger, I think I would take a shot on a guy like Keon Coleman over even a Roman Wilson. For the upside.
Yes.
Now, it depends on the makeup of my team, of course. If I need that slot guy, just reliable receiver, round 4, round 5, sure. But if I'm trying to, throw darts to the ball and see what sticks, if I'm Carolina, I'm taking Keon Coleman over him. Now, the issue is, like you said, it's funny when you said that about the contested, a big guy who didn't have contested catches, because another guy that neither one of us liked, who went pretty high last year, who was another big guy that just was not a contested catch guy. Yep, and Quentin Johnson, and we saw his struggles this year. So
I think Quentin, though, the difference between this is I didn't have Quentin rated highly. Let me look at what I graded.
It was a lot higher. He brings a lot to the table. It's just being so big and not being a contested catch guy kind of is weird.
I did have Quentin Johnston, graded slightly higher than Keon, but only slightly. And I do remember
you were a lot lower on him.
I think I had Johnson in the 60s or 70s on my big board, and there were mock drafts where I didn't put him in the first round, and people dogged on me. But my thing with Keon or comparing them is Quentin, I think, is much better after the catch than Keon is. Keon's very good after the catch, though. But I do mostly agree with you that, like, if I'm in a spot, it depends on my team build and makeup and what I need. But, initially, like, off the cuff, I would kind of rather take a shot on Keon than, like, a Roman Wilson. But that depends, too. Like, do I want an outside receiver or someone that can rotate outside? Or do I want, the slot? And then also, like, do I want a guy that can be a returner? Because, like, Roman Wilson probably could be a pretty good returner for you.
Sure.
Whereas I don't know if I want – well, and, Keon may actually excel in that kind of role now with the new kickoff rule. So it's kind of tough. These new kickoff rules kind of change things up, too, where, like –
it really does. I'm excited for it, though. I'm excited to see that. But I think you got one more guy you want to talk about?
Yeah, we'll hit on the freaking nature that is Johnny Wilson real quick. I wanted to love Johnny Wilson. I'm a sucker for these kind of receivers. Like, I think we all are to some degree. Like, I was a sucker for Colin Johnson for a really long time too. Yeah. And Wilson, there's so much to like, but I'm comparing him to a guy that other people liked that I never was on board with, and that's Akeem Butler. Butler is a little bit smaller than Wilson. Just Wilson's a one of one size wise, but the guy that he's such a tweener in so many ways where like he plays like a wide receiver, like a small wide receiver, like a 6'1" wide receiver, but he's 6'7", and then so it's like, how do you reconcile this? This guy's not ever going to have the like flexibility and ability to like sink his hips the way you need to really, really get separation. So he's going to be a jump ball receiver no matter what he does if he's playing wide receiver. But at the same time, like, he doesn't really play with that physicality and toughness to do it. Like he doesn't have the hand, he does not have reliable enough hands to be that outside receiver. And if you want to move him tight end, he doesn't play strong enough right now. Like he could definitely excel at moving a tight end, like a Darren Waller type of situation or something like that. But
that's what I was gonna get.
He's got to get stronger.
Like, that's what he needs to do, though.
Oh, there's a play where he goes to block Harold Perkins again, like when they're playing at LSU, and Harold Perkins puts him on his back without even like looking at him. Like he didn't even like anticipate Wilson coming, and he still just like easily is not moved.
To be fair, Harold Perkins is probably going to be like a top 5 pick next year.
Yes, but when you're a 6'7" wide receiver and you're 230 pounds, if you're wanting to play tight end at the NFL level, you have to be able to block a player like that, a linebacker.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think he definitely needs to move tight end. Like we talked about this in the past where like I have my 2 types of receivers that I've always loved, and it's the short, quick guys that run, blazing fast speeds. I'm still trying to, sift through that, but I used to love those big guys. And I remember Hakeem Butler, I was a guy that was a lot higher on him, I know, than you. I think me and one of our other friends was higher on him than most others, but I think he was like a wide receiver 6 or 7 in that class. And I mean, looking at it now, it's not so bad. I mean, he obviously was a bust, but the wide receiver class was not great, but it was, above guys like a Terry McLaurin, for instance, above Deontay Johnson. And it's just like, I just love the size. And that's what I've told myself I'm like totally out on Johnny Wilson. Like, there's no reason for me to even care because like I just think he's just too big.
I think he's gonna be extremely fun to use in Madden, and then
yeah, that'd be fun.
But I think his career, his outlook is gonna be a very similar situation as Hakeem Butler. I think he gets taken in like that 4th or 5th round range, and then you're gonna see him not really be able to break the rotation for whatever team he's on, and then try to convert to tight end and bounce around. That's what I kind of predict.
Looking at his mock draft pool is another guy that I'm looking at that he comps to. And it's funny because this is exactly what we're saying. Was drafted. I don't even know if he was drafted, to be honest, but he played 1 year, got 3 targets, no catches with the Detroit Lions in 2019. And in 2020, randomly pops for 38 catches and 539 yards and 4 touchdowns. And that's going to be the myth in fantasy football that lasted about 3 weeks in Travis Fulgham.
It's crazy that Fulgham's even the top though, because Fulgham's 6'2".
I know. But it was just funny. I was looking at that. I was like, man, that's exactly what he needs to do though. Is move over to that tight end role like Travis Fulgham did, because when he
Did
did that with
Fulgham move to
Philly,
tight
like,
end?
yeah, he was playing tight end at the time, I believe.
Really?
Was he not?
He was. I know he was a receiver for Philly that
He was
like
definitely
1 year.
he
I
was
don't know if he
he
moved to
was
tight end or not.
he was I mean, he's not in the league anymore. After that year, he never saw the field again. But he was the guy. I know he was at least playing like a long line of scrimmage or like in the slot. If not, I just remember looking at him and was
Jordan
like, oh, he
Matthews
moved
did
to
that.
tight end.
He used to play for Philly
Jordan
too.
Matthews did do that. You're right. Maybe I'm mixing them two up. I know Jordan Matthews did for sure though.
I always thought that
I
was
just remember
weird
Travis
too because
Fulgham.
Jordan Matthews was like
He's not
came
very
off
big.
as so skinny to me.
Yeah, no, yeah, I didn't understand that either. But yeah, I just happened to see that comp, and I was like, oh, he moved over to tight end. But I might have mixed him up with Jordan Matthews. But anyway, that's gonna wrap it up for today's episodes. And man, the more that we talk about the wide receiver group, even though we were kind of down on this guy Johnny Wilson, like it's exciting because there's gonna be a lot of guys that are gonna be playing wide receiver for a long time in the NFL, and inevitably some of them will flop. It's just how it works in the NFL. But I can see a lot of them being very productive. So if you are a franchise needy or wide receiver needy franchise, I should say, this is probably your draft. But go ahead and follow us on all social medias at empirical_scout. If you're listening to us on Spotify, go ahead and give us
Or
a
Apple
5-star rating.
Podcast.
Or Apple Podcasts now. We're now on that. And if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and click the like and subscribe buttons below. For Taylor, I'm Taylor, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
1, 2.